It had been raining since before sundown. One of those persistent rains that doesn't crash or thunder, just taps, steady, unrelenting, like the world outside is whispering something you're not meant to hear. I live alone in a rental house near the edge of a small, quiet town. Most nights I enjoy the solitude. That night felt different. I had just finished a late dinner and was settling into the couch with a blanket and a lukewarm cup of tea. The glow from the floor lamp filled the living room, casting soft shadows against the rain-slicked windows. I was scrolling through a podcast list when I caught it movement. Not out of the corner of my eye, not a flicker, something more deliberate. It came from the front door, the frosted glass near the top that's supposed to be decorative but always creeps me out at night. I paused, held my breath, and stared at the door, a silhouette. Someone was standing on the other side. I didn't move, just waited. Then came the knock. It was slow, intentional, a rhythm, 1, 2, 3. I froze. I live at the end of a long gravel road. There are no delivery drivers, no neighbors close by, no reason for anyone to show up in this weather. At this hour, I approached the door quietly and looked through the peephole. There he was, a man, probably in his 30s or 40s, soaked from head to toe, no umbrella, no raincoat, just a plain dark hoodie clinging to him, drenched, the hood pulled low over his face. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, his head tilted slightly down, like he wasn't even looking at the door, but listening. Didn't open it. I didn't say a word. I backed away slowly, the floor creaking under my bare feet. And then, as I reached the hallway, I heard it, a dragging sound. It moved across the porch, long and metallic, like someone was scraping a pipe or dragging something heavy. I locked the back door, then the garage door, every window I could reach. My heartbeat was in my ears. When I returned to the front window, I carefully lifted the curtain just an inch to peek outside. The porch was empty. The man was gone. But the doormat had moved. It was folded slightly, like someone had stepped on it hard, turned and vanished. I should have called someone then, a neighbor, the police, anyone but I didn't. Single quotes T. Instead, I sat in the dark living room, all lights off, blanket still, on my lap, staring at the door. For a while, nothing happened. No sound, no movement then. About 20 minutes later, I heard it again, knock, same pattern, 1, 2, 3. But this time it came from the side door, the one that leads into the laundry room, the door that doesn't even have a peephole. Tiptoed toward it and stopped just before the edge of the kitchen. I could see his shadow through the small curtain, still standing there, not moving, just waiting. I backed away. I didn't care how quiet I tried to be. The floor seemed to betray me with every step. Then came the next sound dot. Click, the door handle. He was trying to open it. Thank God I had locked it earlier. The handle turned slowly, then again, harder this time, as if testing how secure it really was. He stood there for a while. I could see his outline breathing, or maybe just shifting slightly. He never knocked again. Eventually, the handle stopped turning. His shape faded from the curtain. I waited over an hour before I moved. It was close to 3 a.m. when I decided to check the garage one last time. I cracked open the inside door slowly. Darkness. I turned on the light. The garage was empty, but I noticed the big garage door was unlocked, and near the bottom corner, something was scratched into the paint. 5 words, jagged, shallow, but unmistakably deliberate. you were supposed to answer. This happened 4 years ago during the holidays. I was visiting family in Massachusetts, staying at my aunt's old house for about a week. The place was massive, a 3-story colonial built in the 1800s, surrounded by woods and set back off the main road. She lived there alone ever since my uncle passed. It was the kind of house you'd expect to be in some vintage ghost story. Creaky wooden floors, long hallways that echo when you walk, doors that shift open if you don't shut them right. The heating barely worked upstairs, so most of the rooms stayed cold, especially the 3rd floor. I asked her about it on the first night. She gave me a quick smile and waved it off. Just storage, she said. Old furniture and boxes. I don't go up there. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. My room was on the 2nd floor, right beneath the stairs to the 3rd. That first night, I had a hard time sleeping. Not because of noise, just the feel of the place. You know when a house feels like it's holding its breath, like it's too quiet. Around 1:30 a.m., I was just starting to drift off when I heard it step dot, a slow, heavy footstep above me. Step, then another. The pacing wasn't fast. In fact, it was painfully slow. Someone walking from one side of the attic to the other. I stared at the ceiling, completely still. I told myself it was just the house creaking. That's what old houses do. They shift. They move. I closed my eyes again. Then came the 3rd step. It was unmistakable. This was someone walking. I sat up in bed, now fully awake. The steps kept going, evenly spaced, from one side of the room above to the other. Then stopped. I waited. Nothing, no. Door slamming, no thud, just silence. I lay there for nearly an hour, barely breathing. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me back under. The next morning, I asked my aunt if maybe a raccoon or something had gotten into the attic. She stopped sipping her coffee and looked up slowly. "No one goes up there," she said. I asked if she'd heard anything last night. She just shook her head, then changed the subject. Later that afternoon, while she was out running errands, I found the courage to go up. The staircase to the 3rd floor was narrow and steep. I hadn't even noticed the light switch until I was halfway up. The bulb flickered as I pulled the chain. The attic wasn't like I expected. It wasn't dusty or crumbling. It was organized. There were covered chairs, old dressers, and a large mirror leaning against the wall. All of it looked like it hadn't been touched in years, yet nothing had a speck of dust. There was one closed door near the far corner, the only room up there with a door still intact. I stepped closer. My shoes echoed across the wood. As I reached out, I noticed something. The floor beneath that door was worn down, like it had been walked on a lot, but the rest of the floor barely touched. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I backed away slowly and left the attic without a word. When my aunt came home, she didn't ask what I'd been up to. She just avoided eye contact all evening. That night, I went to bed early. I was exhausted, but sleep didn't come easy. Around 2:10 a.m., I heard it again, step dot right above me, but this time it was faster. Not walking, pacing, back and forth, for nearly 10 minutes. Then 3 distinct knocks on the floor above, right above my bed, like someone was calling me. I sat up in the dark, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the rain outside. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my aunt. It read, "Don't go up there again." That was it. No greeting, no explanation. The next day I tried to bring it up. I told her I was freaked out. I asked her if she used to store anything strange up there, or if maybe my uncle ever. She cut me off. "I told you," she said quietly. "No one goes up there. Not anymore." Later that evening, before bed, I noticed something through the upstairs hallway mirror. From the angle I was standing, I could see the top of the staircase and the attic door. It was open, just slightly, not wide enough to see in, but enough to... No, it hadn't been like that earlier. I turned on every light in the house and stayed awake all night. The next morning, I packed my bags and told her I needed to head back early. She didn't seem surprised. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, she stood on the porch and called after me. "He used to live up there," she said. "My brother, when we were kids." I turned around. We locked the door one night after things started happening. Thought it would stop. Then she looked up at the third-floor window, but it never did. It was around 11:40 p.m. on a Sunday when I pulled off the interstate. I'd been driving for over 5 hours after visiting my cousin, and a storm had been on my tail for the past hour. The rain was steady, not a downpour, but enough to make the roads shine and distort with every passing headlight. I was in the middle of nowhere, and my fuel light had just blinked on. There weren't many options. I passed 2 exits with no signs, no lights, and then finally saw a green, flickering gas sign ahead, barely lit against the dark sky. I took the turn. The road curved downhill through thick pine woods and came to a stop at what could barely be called a gas station. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the 80s. One gas pump, a single-story concrete building with stained windows. The kind of place that made you feel watched even before stepping inside. But I needed gas. The pump didn't take cards. Of course it didn't, so I pulled my hoodie up, jogged through the rain, and pushed the glass door open. A little bell chimed, slow and tired. Inside was worse. The air was stale and thick, like old motor oil and wet carpet. There was no one at the counter, no sound except the buzzing of the fluorescent lights, one of which blinked in and out. "Hello." I called nothing. I walked toward the front, glancing around the aisles. Expired snacks, cracked soda fridges, a single security camera hanging crooked in the corner. But no one behind the counter. I leaned over the counter and knocked on the surface. "Anyone here? I need to pump some gas." Still nothing. Then, from the back room behind the counter, I heard a cough. It was sharp, deliberate, human, relieved. I called out again. "Hey, I just need to pay real quick." No answer, but the curtain hanging in the doorway moved just a little. I took a step back. That's when I noticed something strange. The register was on, but the monitor was black. No blinking cursor, no numbers, just black, like the screen was off, even though the power button glowed green. I stepped around the counter. The backroom door was ajar now. I pushed it open slowly. Empty, no one inside, just a dirty desk, a cracked mirror, and a half-drunk cup of coffee, still warm, steam lightly curling into the air. Someone had been sitting there moments ago. I stepped back out, unsettled, but I still needed to pump gas. I returned to the door and exited into the rain and stopped cold. There was a man standing by my car. I hadn't heard any vehicles pull in. No one had passed me on the road. But there he was, facing the passenger side, wearing a rain jacket with the hood up. His posture was stiff, still, like he was listening for something inside the car. I called out, "Hey, can I help you?" He didn't respond. He just slowly turned his head. Even under the rain, The haze, I could see his face wasn't quite right. It wasn't that he looked unnatural, it was that he looked unreactive. His eyes didn't widen. His brow didn't twitch. He stared at me the way you look at static on a screen, like it was there. But it didn't matter. He walked away without a word, disappearing into the darkness beside the building. I got in my car and locked the doors. Just then, the lights inside the gas station flickered off. The building went completely black, and in the mirror, I saw something move in the rear seat. I turned fast. There was nothing there, just my coat and backpack. I turned the ignition. It wouldn't start. I tried again. Nothing. I hit the dashboard and took a deep breath, trying not to panic. Then the lights flickered back on. I glanced at the station. The man was inside now, standing behind the counter, hands at his sides. He hadn't passed me. I hadn't seen him re-enter, but he was in there, and he was staring at me, motionless. I got out again, slower this time, walked up to the door. The bell didn't ring this time when I opened it. "Do you work here?" I asked. He didn't blink, just slowly reached under the counter and pulled out a key. Then he walked over and handed it to me. No words, I took it and left. Walking slowly to the pump, inserting the key, it worked. The pump activated. I filled the tank while glancing back every few seconds. The man never came back out. When I was done, I got into my car. The ignition started on the first try. I pulled away, the station shrinking behind me in the mirror. But about 10 minutes down the road, I glanced in my rear view one last time. A single red truck had pulled out behind me. Same dull headlights, same narrow road. It followed me for almost 20 miles, then turned off without signaling. No houses there, no driveways, just forest. I drove all the way home that night, didn't stop once, and I never found that gas station again on any map. This happened last winter, not long after I moved into an older rental home in rural Virginia. It was a 2-story farmhouse just outside of a small town, cheap, quiet, and surrounded by trees on all sides. A little worn down, yeah, but I was coming out of a rough divorce and I needed space, physically and mentally. The second floor of the house was mostly unused. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, but I kept my bedroom and everything else on the ground floor. Less hassle with heating, fewer stairs to climb. I didn't have any guests anyway. It started on a Sunday night. It had been raining most of the day, that slow, constant rain that never lets up. I was curled up on the living room couch with a blanket and a book, letting the storm roll in around me. The place was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the distant sound of water dripping into one of the gutters outside. That's when I saw something strange in the reflection of the dark window across from me. I noticed a light. It was subtle, a soft glow that didn't match the warm lamp beside me. It looked like it was coming from behind me. Upstairs, I turned my head and looked down the hallway. Sure enough, the light was on upstairs. I hadn't turned it on. I was sure of it. I hadn't even been up there that day. I stood up slowly, listening. No footsteps, no creaking, just the quiet hum of the rain outside and that weird, buzzing sense that I wasn't alone anymore. I made my way to the base of the staircase and stared up. The hallway light at the top of the stairs was on that old yellow ceiling bulb that flickered for a second before warming to full brightness. That's what caught me off guard, because the bulb always flickers when you flip the switch, and I never saw it flicker. I should have just let it go. Told myself it was a short circuit or the wiring acting up. But instead, I climbed the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, louder than it should have been. At the top, the hallway stretched to both sides. The room with the light on was the last door on the left, a room I hadn't touched since moving in. The door was slightly ajar. I stepped closer. The door let out a low groan as I pushed it open. The room was empty, unfurnished, bare wood floors, white walls, one window facing the backyard, and the overhead light, that damn yellow bulb, glowing softly, steady, without a flicker. I flipped the switch off and stood there for a moment. The silence was louder now. I turned and left, shutting the door behind me. Back downstairs, I locked up, turned out the lights, and got ready for bed. But I didn't sleep well. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up suddenly. No sound, no nightmare, just a weird instinct. I sat up in bed and listened. The rain had picked up again, and something else, faint creaking, coming from above, slow, uneven. Footsteps, they moved from one side of the upstairs hallway to the other, paused, then returned. I stared at the ceiling. There was no mistaking it. Someone or something was up there. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and crept into the hallway. The stairs loomed like a black hole in the dark. I aimed the beam upward and froze. The upstairs hallway, light was back on. I never heard the switch. This time, I didn't go up. I just stood at the base of the stairs, breathing, heart hammering in my chest. Then I heard it tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, not on a door, not on the wall, on the floor right above me. I stepped back, locked my bedroom door, and stayed awake. The rest of the night, flashlight in hand. The next morning, I went back up during daylight. I opened the door to the same room and stood in the threshold. Nothing had changed. Except for one thing, the overhead bulb was missing. Gone. No shattered glass, no pieces, just an empty socket. That night, I slept with every light on, and I didn't go upstairs again for 2 weeks. But the light kept turning on, even though there was no bulb. That was the part that really started to break me. I thought I was losing it. So one day, I finally brought over an electrician. He looked confused when I explained the issue, but agreed to check the wiring dot after a full inspection. He looked at me and said, "There's no power running to that fixture anymore. It was disconnected from the panel. You sure you're not seeing light from somewhere else?" I didn't even know what to say. That night, it rained again, and just after midnight, I sat on the couch with the window reflection in front of me, and just like before upstairs, glowed. But now, with no bulb, number, power, and no explanation. I moved out the following month. Last October, I rented a cabin in the Smoky Mountains for a solo retreat. I needed to reset, mentally, emotionally. Too many deadlines, too much noise. I wanted silence, isolation, somewhere with no service and no one for miles. The listing was perfect. A 1-bedroom wooden cabin tucked deep in the woods. No neighbors, no Wi-Fi, no contact. Just a fireplace, a back deck, and a view of the trees. The kind of place you see in fall calendars or horror movies. I got there late in the afternoon. The sun was falling behind the trees, casting long shadows over the gravel driveway. I stepped out of the car and took a breath. It was colder than I expected, still, quiet in a way that felt heavier than peaceful. I liked it at first. The cabin itself was charming, a little outdated, sure, but cozy. It had a small kitchen, a narrow hallway, one bedroom, and a living room with tall windows that looked out into the woods. There were no curtains, just glass. Unpacking, I made dinner, lit a fire, and sat on the couch with a book. Outside, it began to rain, a light, steady mist tapping against the windows. The perfect ambience at one point. I got up to grab a drink from the fridge. That's when I noticed something strange. On the back deck, just past the glass, was a trail of wet footprints, barefoot, leading across the wood planks, and stopping near the edge. I froze. I hadn't been out there yet. The deck was soaked from the rain, and I'd only arrived an hour before. There was no way I made those dots. I opened the back door slowly. The air hit me immediately, damp and cold. I stepped onto the deck and examined the prints. They were small, narrow, like a child's feet, but longer. The toes splayed unnaturally wide, and they weren't fading. They looked fresh. I didn't hear anything out there, but the hairs on my neck stood up. I backed inside, locked the door, and told myself it was nothing. Maybe some condensation from the roof dripping weird, or a raccoon, something stupid. I went to bed early that night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up. The rain had picked up into a full storm, wind against the walls, branches snapping outside. But that wasn't what woke me. It was the sound of footsteps, not in the house, not on the roof, on the deck. They were slow, heavy, wet. I lay frozen in bed, eyes wide in the dark. My bedroom faced the back deck. No curtains on that window either. I didn't move, just stared up at the ceiling, heart racing. The footsteps stopped, then a knock, soft but deliberate. On the glass, I swallowed hard and turned, my head toward the window. There was nothing there. No figure, no face, just the darkness and the vague shimmer of rain trickling down the glass. I stayed still for what felt like an hour until I fell back asleep from sheer exhaustion. In the morning, I checked the back door again. No footprints this time. No sign anyone or anything had been out there. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't, so I took a walk through the woods to clear my head. The trail behind the cabin led down into a grove of trees, beautiful in autumn, leaves covered, the ground like a gold and red blanket. The farther I went, the quieter it got. At one point I heard rustling off the trail, deeper in the trees. I stopped and listened. Then I saw it, a figure far back in the woods, standing still between the trees. No movement, no sound, just watching. They were facing me. I couldn't see details, just the outline. Their skin looked pale, too pale for someone out here without a jacket. I took a step back. The figure mirrored me. Same movement, same timing. I turned and walked away. Not fast, just calmly, like it wasn't a big deal. But inside, I was panicking. I got back to the cabin and locked every door, every window. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but I was on edge. I didn't go out again. I sat by the fire and tried to distract myself with a movie downloaded to my laptop. That night, I triple-checked all the locks. I still couldn't sleep. At 1:48 a.m. I heard it again, footsteps, but this time they were inside. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. They were faint, moving slowly down the hallway. Toward the bedroom, my door creaked, slightly like pressure was against it. Then it stopped. I waited. I don't know how long. Eventually, I must have passed out from fear, because I woke up to daylight filtering through the window. The door was shut, locked, but there were muddy prints on the hallway floor, leading away from my room and stopping right at the back door. I checked the deck again. The footprints were back. This time, they led from the edge of the woods to the door, like someone had entered, but never left. I packed my stuff before noon, but before I left, I took one last look around the cabin to make sure I hadn't left anything behind. That's when I noticed something scratched into the inside of the bedroom closet door. It was faint, like someone had used a nail. The words, "Stayed here with you." Last year, I moved into a small 2-bedroom house in the outskirts of Asheville. It was the kind of place you find after months of scrolling through listings. Cheap, quiet, slightly outdated, but well kept. A long gravel driveway, a tree-lined backyard, and most importantly, peace. I had just gotten out of a weird roommate situation, so living alone felt like a relief. The house didn't feel haunted or strange at first. It felt normal, and after the chaos I dealt with, normal was perfect. But there was one thing I didn't like. The attic dot in the center of the hallway ceiling was a square panel with a pull-down ladder, and next to it, mounted directly into the ceiling, was a ventilation fan. It looked ancient. A boxy metal unit, half rusted and humming faintly even when off. It had no visible switch, no timer, but it would occasionally kick on in the middle of the night with this deep, rumbling whir like an old generator struggling to breathe. The landlord told me it was wired into a temperature sensor. Kicks on when it gets too hot upstairs, he said. That explanation might have worked, except it wasn't hot, not even warm. The fan came on regardless of the weather, even in December, when the attic should have been freezing at first. I ignored it. It was annoying, sure, but not scary, just old wiring. Just another weird quirk in an old rental. But things changed about a month in. It was a Friday night, and it had been raining hard since the afternoon. Thick grey clouds hung low, and the wind shook the trees outside like they were trying to leave. I was in bed around 1 a.m., drifting off, when the attic fan turned on, loud. Constant, I sighed. Pulled the blanket over my head and waited for it to stop. But this time, it didn't keep going. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then I heard something else. Movement directly above me. Slow creaking, like someone or something was shifting their weight across the attic beams. It didn't sound like squirrels or mice. It was too rhythmic, too heavy. I stared at the ceiling. My room was directly beneath the fan. The creaking stopped, but the fan kept going. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The attic panel was shut, but I could hear the vibration from the fan just above it, pulsing steadily like a living thing. Then, just as I reached for the pull string, it clicked off. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I stood there for a long time, staring up at that panel. The next morning, I pulled down the ladder and climbed up. The attic was cramped, insulation along the floor, wooden beams. No lighting except for the weak sun filtering through a vent in the wall. It looked empty except for something in the far corner. A crumpled blanket next to it. Food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a single cracked phone. It was dusty, but not old. The blanket wasn't musty. The trash was recent labels, still shiny. Someone had been living up there. I backed down the ladder and called the police. They searched the attic and confirmed it had been used recently, but found no one. They didn't take it too seriously. Maybe a squatter, maybe a previous tenant who came back. They shrugged it off, but I didn't. That night, I triple-locked everything. Slept with a knife under my pillow. Nothing happened. until 3 days later it was raining again. The fan turned on at 3:17 a.m. I sat up instantly. This time, I didn't go into the hallway. I stayed in bed and listened. A moment later, tap. Then another. Tap, 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 tap. Something was tapping against the vent cover above me, like fingers. Then I heard a low creaky, the attic panel shifting, ever so slightly, not opening, just moving. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next day, I taped the panel shut from the outside. I duct taped every edge, sealed it tight, covered it with a chair and a broom handle just in case. That night, the fan came on again, but this time, it stopped after 30 seconds. I thought maybe whatever was up there had finally left, until I checked. The hallway, the next morning, the tape was gone. Not peeled, cut, clean, slices through the duct tape, like with a razor. The chair was untouched. The broom hadn't moved, but the attic panel was open 2 inches. I moved out a week later. When I told the landlord what I found, he looked down, sighed, and said, "I always wondered if he came back." I asked, "Who?" He didn't answer, just walked away. This happened to me when I was 16, during the winter of my junior year in high school. At the time, I was living with my grandparents in a small town in Pennsylvania, one of those quiet, foggy places where you can still hear coyotes howling. At night, and everything shuts down by 8 p.m., their house sat on the edge of a long tree-lined road called Bellamy. You could walk the whole stretch and maybe pass 3 other homes. Every morning, I'd walk about a quarter mile down to the bus stop, right where Bellamy curved into a wooded clearing. Even on sunny days, that bus stop felt off. There were no streetlights there, no nearby houses, just a broken mailbox, a leaning road sign, and a worn-down patch of dirt where students used to wait. Except there were no students anymore. I was the only pickup on that route. One morning in early December, I woke up late. It was still dark outside, but a pale grey light was creeping through the clouds, and it was raining, that steady, icy drizzle that chills your bones. I threw on my jacket, grabbed my bag, and headed down the gravel driveway. By the time I reached the bus stop, my hood was soaked, my fingers stiff. I stood there, alone, just like every morning, until I noticed something across the road. There was someone else at the stop. A kid, maybe my age, maybe a little older. No umbrella, no backpack, just standing on the opposite side of the street, about 15 feet away, with his head down and his hands in his pockets. I hadn't heard anyone walk up. No car, no crunching leaves. He was just there. "Hey," I called out. No response. He didn't even flinch. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the kind that sags in the rain, and jeans soaked to the ankles. His shoes looked old, maybe too small for his feet. I tried again, a little louder. "Are you waiting for the bus?" Still nothing. That's when I noticed the ground around him. The puddles at his feet, they weren't rippling, they weren't even wet. It was like the rain didn't touch him. The ground beneath him looked dry. I took a small step forward, but the sound of tires broke the silence. The school bus pulled up behind me. I glanced back across the road. The kid was gone. I stepped onto the bus, half expecting the driver to say something, but she didn't. I walked to my usual seat near the back and looked out the window. No one, just mist and trees. I spent the whole school day thinking about him. That kid. I asked around. No one knew who I was talking about. I even described his clothes to a few students who lived nearby. blank stares, shaking heads. That night, I told my grandfather. He didn't say much at first, just sat quiet in his recliner, staring into the fireplace. Then he asked, "Where exactly did you see him?" I told him, right at the bend where Bellamy curves. Across from the old broken mailbox, his face went pale. He stood up slowly and left the room. Came back with a folded newspaper from a drawer I didn't even know existed. The front page was from 5 years earlier. Local teen killed in Hidden Run near Bellamy Road bus stop. The photo was old, but the face was familiar. Same eyes, same sagging hoodie. His name was David, 16 years old, waiting for the bus when someone came round the bend too fast. They hit him, then sped off. It was raining that morning too. The case was never solved. They didn't find him until 2 days later, deep in the woods. The theory was that the car threw his body that far from the impact. But what stuck with me was what my grandfather said next. He told me that in the days after the accident, some neighbors claimed they saw a boy standing across the street from the stop, just before sunrise. Never moved, never spoke, always vanished before anyone could approach him. One neighbor swore the kid was standing completely dry in the rain. Same spot, same posture. I stopped taking the bus after that. I made up an excuse about wanting to walk to school, too, stay in shape, but I never walked past that bend again. Even now, I'm 27, living 2 states away. I still think about that morning sometimes, when it rains. I get this feeling like I'm being watched, like someone's standing just across the street, waiting. I live on the 9th floor of a quiet apartment building in Portland, the kind of place that feels like it's suspended in the air above real life. No loud neighbors, no kids running through the halls, just me, a cat I inherited from my ex, and the distant hum of traffic below. My balcony faces a narrow alley between 2 buildings. It's not much of a view, mostly brick, ventilation pipes, and rooftops. But at night, when the city quiets and the rain hits just right, there's something peaceful about it. I don't use the balcony often. It's too small to sit on, and the railing feels unstable. Still, I leave the blinds open most nights, just enough to let the streetlights cast soft orange slashes across the living room. This happened in February. It had been raining for days, and the air was thick with that cold, metallic smell rain brings when it won't let up. I'd been up late working on a deadline. At around 2:15 a.m., I closed my laptop and shut off the overhead lights. The apartment went dark, except for the glow of my screen and the dim light from the window. I remember standing there, just staring out. The alley below was empty. No cars, no wind, just the endless drizzle. Then I noticed her, a woman standing on my balcony. She was facing the glass, no more than 2 feet away from me. She wasn't moving. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I froze, watching her through the rain-covered glass. She looked soaked. Her hair hung in wet strands across her face. Her hands were at her sides, limp fingers slightly curled. She wore what looked like a nightgown, or thin, dress the kind that clings to you when wet. Her feet were bare. She was looking down at the floor, not at me, not yet. I backed away slowly, nearly tripping over the coffee table then. Without warning, she lifted her head. Her face was pale, eyes wide and hollow. Not bloodshot, just empty. Skin too smooth. Lips slightly parted, like she was mid-breath but had never exhaled. And then she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't aggressive. It was wrong, like her face had been taught how to smile, but never told why. I ducked behind the wall and called the building's front desk. "There's someone on my balcony," I whispered. "Ninth floor, she's just standing there, please send someone." The man on the other end paused, then said calmly, "Sir, there's no way anyone could be on your balcony. There's no external access." I pressed him, told him I was, looking right at her. "Can you see her now?" he asked. I peeked around the corner. She was gone. The balcony was empty. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even check the door. I just sat on the couch until sunrise, phone in hand, shaking. The next day, I told myself it was a hallucination. Stress, lack of sleep, that kind of thing happens. I tried to forget, but 2 nights later, while brushing my teeth, I passed by the living room window again. The balcony chair, the one I never used, had been moved. It was now directly in front of the glass, turned inward, facing the apartment. I didn't sit in it. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it for a long time. I eventually moved it back. A few days passed. No incidents until the rain returned. Same time, same feeling. That heavy air, that silence. I didn't go near the window, but just before bed, I peeked through the blinds one last time. The chair was facing the window. Again, and sitting in it was her, still soaked, smiling, looking directly at me. I turned on every light in the apartment and called the police. I told them someone had broken in. They arrived 10 minutes later, searched the balcony, searched the entire building. No one, no signs of forced entry, no wet footprints. But one of the officers, after checking the balcony, leaned over and asked me, "How long have you lived here?" 3 years, I said. He nodded slowly. "You ever hear of a woman who fell from this building?" I froze. He told me that 10 years ago, a woman on the 9th floor had been found on the pavement below, alone, middle of the night. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses. But here's the thing. The apartment she fell from had no balcony, at least, not back then. 3 summers ago, I went hiking alone for the first time. I had done group hikes plenty of times before, but something about the solitude of a solo trip appealed to me. I wanted to disconnect, recharge, and just be alone for a few days, without phone service or distractions. I chose a quiet state forest in northern Oregon. There were trails that went on for miles, a few primitive campsites, and not much else. The ranger station gave me a printed map and warned that cell signal was spotty. I told them that was exactly what I wanted. I hiked 6 miles in the first day and set up camp near a clearing just off the trail. It was beautiful, tall pine trees, soft moss, and the distant sound of a creek. I set up my tent, built a small fire, and made dinner. It rained that night, light but steady. I sat under a tarp and watched it roll off the leaves. The forest gets so quiet when it rains. All the animals hide. The wind dies. The world just hushes. And in that silence, I heard something strange. That was distant, muffled, but unmistakable. A phone ringing. I turned off my lantern to listen. It rang again, same tone, a generic chime that echoed faintly through the trees. It sounded like it was coming from deeper in the woods, just off the trail. I didn't move, just sat there, frozen under the tarp, listening to the rain and the unnatural sound of a phone ringing in a place where phones shouldn't work. After a few seconds, it stopped. I waited, nothing. Eventually, I crawled into my tent and zipped it shut, telling myself I imagined it. Maybe it was a weird bird call. Maybe thunder echoing wrong. Anything but what it really sounded like. But around 2 a.m., I heard it again, closer. This time, it wasn't ringing. It was vibrating. You know the sound. The rapid, dry buzz of a phone set on a hard surface. Short bursts, like a text coming through. Pause. I sat up. It was just outside my tent, less than 10 feet away. I didn't breathe. I didn't unzip the flap. I just listened. The buzzing continued for almost a minute, then stopped. I waited until sunrise to move. When I stepped outside, the forest looked completely normal. Wet and still. No footprints. No signs anyone had been there. But 10 feet away, near a fallen log, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A trail of small, round indentations in the moss. Not shoe prints, not animal tracks. Almost like something had been dragged. I packed up immediately. As I hiked back, I tried not to think about it. Just focus on the trail. Just get to the car. But about an hour in, I passed a tree with something nailed to it. A phone. It was split down the center, like it had been hit with a rock. The screen was black. The plastic casing warped. Underneath it, carved into the bark in shaky lines. Don't answer. I stared at it for a long time. I couldn't make sense of it. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt like a warning. And then, as I stood there, trying to calm my nerves, my own phone buzzed in my backpack. I hadn't had signal in days. I pulled it out. One new voicemail. No missed call. No number. Just the message. I played it. Static, at first, then breathing. Shallow. Uneven. Too close to the mic. Then a voice whispered, "Where did you go?" I dropped the phone and took off. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station. I must have looked insane, covered in sweat, shaking, rambling about phones and carvings, and someone following me. The ranger didn't laugh. In fact, when I mentioned the ringing in the woods, his face changed. He asked, "What trail?" When I told him, he went quiet. "That's the same stretch where we found that missing hiker's pack last spring," he said. "The one who disappeared without a trace." I asked if he ever found a phone. He shook his head. "Just the charger, cord. I've never been back. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and check my phone, just to make sure it's not ringing." This happened late last fall, right after Thanksgiving. I was driving home from my parents' place. A 5-hour trip through mostly back roads and 2-lane highways that cut through the mountains. I've done the drive dozens of times. I know. Every curve, every mile marker, every lonely gas station along the way. That night, it started to rain about halfway through. Not a thunderstorm, just a cold, steady rain. The kind that blurs your windshield no matter how high your wipers are set. Visibility dropped, everything turned grey. And then I saw a house. I came around a bend and saw it out of the corner of my eye. Just off the road, a 2-story farmhouse. Painted dark green, set back about 50 feet into a clearing. It had a long gravel driveway, a porch with a swing, and a single upstairs light, glowing faint yellow behind gauzy curtains. It was subtle ordinary, except I knew it didn't belong there. There's never been a house on that stretch of road, not ever. It's all trees for miles. I slowed down instinctively, tires hissing on wet asphalt. I even rolled down the window, half expecting to hear dogs barking or someone on the porch. Nothing, just the soft patter of rain and the low hum of my engine. I pulled off to the shoulder, put on my hazards, and stared. The house looked still, too still, like it was holding its breath. And then I swear this happened. The porch light flicked on. It didn't flicker to life. It snapped on, like someone inside had flipped a switch. I waited. No movement. No shadows behind the curtains. But the light was now on. I told myself to keep driving. This wasn't my business. It was late. I was tired. But then I saw someone move in the upstairs window. Just a silhouette, barely visible behind the curtain. They leaned forward slowly, pressing their face close to the glass, watching me. I couldn't see their features, but I could feel them watching, a cold, deliberate stare. I shifted the car into drive and started to pull away, and then I noticed something in the rearview mirror. There was no driveway behind me. I slammed on the brakes, confused. Looked again, nothing, just trees. I turned back and the house was gone. Gone like it had never been there. No light, no structure, no gravel, just woods and shadows and the endless whisper of rain on the leaves. I sat there for a long time, engine running, heart racing. Eventually, I drove off. Didn't stop until I reached a town with lights and people and gas stations that stayed open past midnight. I told myself it was a trick of the rain, maybe a weird reflection, maybe a dream I didn't know I was having. But a few days later, I got curious. I looked up satellite maps, pulled up the exact GPS coordinates of where I stopped. I zoomed in, and what I found was worse than if I'd found nothing at all. There was a house there, or at least there had been an old farmhouse, burned down in 1983, according to the report. It caught fire just after midnight during a storm. The family inside never made it out. For people, parents and 2 daughters, cause of the fire never determined. But here's what chilled me. The photo attached to the article, black and white, grainy, showed the house as it once stood. Same porch, same swing, same upstairs window with the gauzy curtains. The caption underneath, last photo taken before the fire. I haven't taken that road since, and I never will again, because every time I hear rain against the glass, I see that upstairs light and wonder what would have happened if I'd knocked on the door. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another night of terror. We post true horror stories, real encounters, and the unexplained, and remember what's waiting in the dark might already know your name. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and whatever you do, don't turn around.